Hello everybody, welcome to Crafty Soup. My name is Misty. I'm here with a layout process video as part of the design team over at the Scrap Happy membership group. We are doing a year-long series called Unexpected Inspiration, where we take an interesting form of inspiration and create layouts from it, and this time around we are using wedding cakes. And as soon as I saw this inspiration, I knew what I was going to do, so let's talk about it. Wedding cakes to me mean flowers, and not just a few flowers, but lots and lots and lots of flowers. So if you saw that wedding cake image, it had a whole cascade of flowers coming down the side. So that's where I started this layout. I had no idea what story I was going to tell, but I knew I needed flowers. Now, I used an exclusive die from a recent Concord at Ninth event, but if you like this idea, this die set from Spellbinders, and I'll link you up below, has a lot of floral pieces in it, and you're going to need a lot of them because the more floral pieces you have, the less die cutting you will have to do, because you can just throw them all on there and die cut them all at once. Now, I die cut all the flowers out of white and all of the foliage out of vellum, but of course you could do anything you want. Some wedding cakes have bold pops of color to them, but I kept mine really, really soft and mellow. And I'm going to add just a little hint of color to these. And actually, it's not even really color, it's more of shadow. Part of the class that I recently took at Concord and 9 was about ink blending plain white florals to give them color. And that way you only have to carry one sheet of cardstock, really. You don't need a bazillion colors to do these kinds of things. You just need all the ink pads to go with them. And that philosophy definitely fits very well with my style, because I like to tend to be a bit economical about product choices, although I love color, so I buy all of the color products pretty much, and that way you can color up your own products how you see fit. Now, because I did not know what I was going to do with these flowers, which story I was going to tell yet, I did want to keep these really, really neutral. So just by adding this, I believe this is Pebble from Concord at 9th, it's a tanny gray color, and just by adding this bit of color to the central of the flowers, that will help add depth to the final project without adding color that could potentially clash with whatever I decide to do. So I set all of these up on a grip mat, and I happen to use a waffle flower grip mat, and that way they are held in place, and it actually holds my ink pad in place also, so that it makes this ink blending process go a little bit faster. Now, I'm not going to show you everything because I did cut a million flowers, and in fact, I was worried that I wouldn't have enough, because when I'm doing the florals like this, I layer them up, 2 or 3 different sizes and shapes of flowers layered up together to give really full flowers. All right, as I'm working with my ink blending, you'll notice that I kind of rotated my ink pad, because if you're tapping your ink blending tool in the same spot too many times, you're going to suck up a lot of ink from that portion of the ink pad, and then you're not going to have as much ink to continue blending. So go ahead and rotate your ink pad around as you're moving, and some of that ink will kind of move into those empty spaces. Now, the Concord and 9th ink does dry back, which means it dries a lot lighter than what it looks like wet, and that's what I was showing you there. So you may need to, depending on your ink pad and brand, a lot of inks these days do dry back. So you may need to do a layer and then check it out and see if you need to add more ink. Once you are familiar with your brand of ink, you'll kind of get a sense of how much they will dry back. I have this other smaller ink blending tool, and that's from Ulta New, and that comes in super handy when you're doing teeny tiny flowers, and I do like to go ahead and add some shadowing to these little flowers. I think it just gives a much nicer finishing touch to everything. If you don't have that teeny tiny ink blending tool, you could possibly use a Q-tip. I haven't tried it yet, but I have thought it every time I pulled out this tool. All right, with everything blended, I didn't do anything with the foliage and the vellum. I'm just going to let that be the accent that it will be, and the flowers I wanted to give more emphasis to. So I'm going to just lay out all the different shapes and sizes of flowers I have. Now, you'll notice that some of them have cut off edges and are imperfect, but that's okay with me because I'm going to be tucking these. I will just be sure to hide any imperfections underneath something else. So I'm going to lay out all my shapes and sizes and then decide on just a couple of styles. So with my biggest petals, I'm going to layer up 2 of those and then add in a medium petal and a small petal to create this one style of flower, and then I will leave some of those bigger petals not layered, and then I will add a couple of different smaller layers to those. Does that make sense? So that I'm coming up with similar yet slightly different flower styles so that I will have a variety when I'm ready to tuck and layer all these on the final project. And then I go ahead and move on to my next size. And so when I was cutting flowers, I did cut more of the smaller sizes because I knew I would be using those both as independent flowers and as layers to the larger flowers. So I really tried to cut, a few of the largest ones, a good chunk of the medium ones, and then lots and lots of little ones. So that gave me plenty of ways to layer these up. And I do want even these littlest flowers, because you'll see how I'm going to create this cascade where it kind of tapers off, and that's what the little flowers are for. So it is a little bit of a process, but the die cutting, the inking, and here I am gluing. I just try to assembly line it as much as possible and make it very efficient. And when I'm just using one color blending, that definitely helps. All right, but I'm not done with these flowers yet because I'm going to give them a little more texture and dimension. And that little circle that I made with my fingers was actually a tip that I learned from J.C. Gaspar, who was the teacher at the Concord and Ninth event that I mentioned earlier, that I just took. This is how I usually fluff up my flowers. I just kind of use my fingernail to curl the petals. So give all of these ways a try and see if you like one over the other. All right, now that I had all my flowers made, I had to come up with which story I wanted to use. And at first I thought I was going to use this photo of my daughter for one of her school events, but I decided the flowers are really, especially the way I made the flowers, they're really more formal. So I wanted to use a formal story. So this is my middle kid graduating from college recently, and their favorite color is purple, shades of purple. So I'm going to use these purple pattern papers to create a layered frame. And I'm going to use a circle because wedding cakes are often circular. So I will take that top sheet to my Cricut. I will cut a circle out of it. And this is where I got kind of conservative with how big I made my circle because I was worried I wouldn't have enough flowers. So I made it just big enough to frame out. Oh, I always forget to take off the stickers from my pattern paper. So there, you get to see me do that. So I made the circle frame just big enough to tuck that photo in there, and behind it, I will pop up that layer with plenty of foam tape. And this is a thinner foam tape, so it doesn't take up too much bulk in scrapbook albums. And I kind of like that. I wasn't sure, because I'm used to using thicker foam. I wasn't sure that I would like this foam tape so much. It's from Tailored Expressions. And while the release papers are a little trickier for my fingers, I do like that it's in strips. I do like the thinnerness of it. So I have mixed feelings about that foam tape because I do often have troubles getting it to peel up. And that is definitely one of my pet peeves. Okay, here is a tip to taping a huge sheet of foam tape. I just take off the top cover strips there, or you can do this with the bottom pieces. And then once those are adhered, I will go ahead and take off all of the rest of the release papers. And then I can just kind of gently lay everything down as I go. And that will mostly get things aligned. You can see I have just a smidgen of an edge there, but you know what? That's not bugging me, so I will just leave it. I tried to leave edges around the circle so that I would be able to tuck that photo back under there, but I didn't quite get it, so I'm just going to clip my photo off just a little bit, and that will now fit. So I've got to arrange that photo so you won't see that little cut. And then once it's in place, I can just add a little liquid glue to make sure it stays in place. All right, and now it is time for the flowers. So I'm going to start with the biggest flowers, and I'm going to put them at the bottom of my layout. And then I'm going to slowly work towards smaller flowers as I move up and around both sides of the circle. As I'm arranging these larger flowers, this is what I didn't do. I did not zhuzh up all of the flowers ahead of time. I figured I would zhuzh them as I go, and there's a good reason for saving that step. And that's because if you're going to tuck these flowers underneath other things, you want to leave those petals flat because they will tuck better. And that way you can just zhuzh up 2 or 3. Oh, I tore my flower. That is one of the dangers of using your fingernails. But I just glued it back on, and really nobody's going to notice because there's so many flowers. Now, I am being a little more careful to hold where that petal connects to the center of the flower. And I just used up 3 of the petals and left the other ones flat so that it would tuck nicer, and it will be less squishy on the layout to glue them together. All right, anywhere that there's little gaps, I will tuck in with some smaller flowers, but mostly I'm going to try and put all of my sizes up and around so that I have the bulk of my cascade of flowers in place. And that way I don't run out of flowers, and I can always fill in the blanks and the gaps with that foliage that I cut out of the vellum. So as I'm working with my medium flowers and then here my smallest flowers, I will start filling in those gaps. And that will bring us to the littlest flowers, which I start adding up there to the top. At this point, I need to leave space for my title. I'm not going to have a lot of journaling on this page because it's going to be a lead-in page to other layouts that go along with this graduation. This is the point where I realized I would like to go ahead and add a little bit more color to these flowers. So I'm going to take a lavender ink that coordinates with the paper. These are all different companies and brands, so I just found something that would be good. And I'm just going to add a blush of this color just to the tips of the largest flowers. I am not going to do all these flowers, but here hopefully you can see just a tiny hint of blush of color. All right, I put all those flowers back in place, and really nothing is quite glued down at this point. I am trying to make sure I've got a good design going on and filling in the blanks with all of these pieces before I start gluing. And then I will just kind of glue one thing at a time so that I make sure that everything has as much balance to it as I can. Now, when these very full layouts, it can take me a minute I need to kind of stop and step back and take a look at it, or walk away from it, go have lunch, come back and look at it, because it all starts bleeding together in my mind. And so when I step back from it and I come back, I can see where there's more awkward spaces. So I do that, take a few breaks during this process so it's not a continuous sitting and staring at these petals and flowers the whole entire time. And then again, I'm adding a little bit more color. So I added heavier color to these smaller flowers because that will carry almost the same weight as the bigger flowers with less color. So hopefully that makes sense there. I did go ahead and put on my title off camera. I am adding in a few more bits and pieces here to make sure I've filled in those gaps like I mentioned. And then it's looking pretty good at this point. It's not perfect. I see some spaces where my symmetry is a little bit off, but I'm going to be okay with that, and I'm going to let it go because I do think it is beautiful. And while it took quite a while to do this, it is well worth the time. Now, at this point, I thought I was done, but I realized I had these little clear drops that are from Concord and Ninth that I wanted to add to this. It adds another layer of texture and embellishment, but because they're clear, it's not too heavy or distracting. So I'm going to add those, especially my title was feeling a little unfinished. I'm going to add a couple of those around my title. This is a point where I wish I had kind of moved my upper word a little bit over because it feels out of proportion to the lower word with it being situated that far over. But again, I'm going to make do with all of that. I found a little tip to these because they're domed on the top and flat on the bottom. I was able to just kind of bump them with the tip of my stylus tool, and that would help them flip over so that I would have a better grip with my wax tool pickup stick. So I will put those in the center of most of the flowers, and my wax tip pickup stick was getting dull. The sharper your tip is, the kind of better it works because it will release better. If you have a rounder tip, it'll pick up better, but then it has a hard time releasing. So there's always kind of a balance with these wax tools. So I can just give it a little bit of shave with a blade, and you can use the blade of a scissors if you don't have a craft knife like that. And that makes it function a lot how it's intended to function. Those tips are replaceable, but I want to use up as much of the tip as I can before I replace it. So if you know how to sharpen your tips, you'll make your money go a lot farther. All right, I give it a little bit of a shake to make sure I didn't miss any glue on any of those little dewdrops, and that actually finishes off the layout for this time. So I will leave you with a few close-ups. I encourage you, if you're not already a member of the Scrap Happy group, go and check out and see what we have to offer. There's lots of activities all month long, including month-long scrappy challenges that happen several times a year, and one of those times is only for members. So I will leave you links down below to all of that. I am not paid to do this video on YouTube. I am paid to do blog posts, so I will link you up to that as well. And until I see you next time, I hope you have an artful day.